today we'll continue talking about the Fourth Council of Constantinople, the eighth overall ecumenical council of the Catholic Church. We saw last time how in the Byzantine Empire, after the Seventh Ecumenical Council, the Second Council of Nicaea in 787, the Empress Irene was an advocate of icons, of religious artwork, and that she was very unpopular with the military and not a great administrator of the empire. So when she was eventually overthrown, her replacements were again all iconoclast, those who were against the veneration, against the usage and reproduction of religious icons and imagery. And this persecution during different periods against those who made and venerated icons went on until the mid-800s. At this point, an empress by the name of Theodora was left widowed, and even though her husband had been continuing this policy of the destruction of icons and the repression of those who made the icons, she herself was an advocate of the iconophiles, those who love icons, or the iconodules, those who venerate the icons. She became regent in the year 842 for her young son, Michael I. And during this time, she named the next patriarch of Constantinople, Methodius. The two of them restored icons to their place within the churches and condemned the policy of iconoclasm, which by this point dated back nearly 130 years, so many generations of struggle over this one issue. And she and, well, more fittingly, Patriarch Methodius declared the first Sunday of Lent in the Byzantine calendar to be Orthodox Sunday, on which the fathers of the first 7 ecumenical councils are commemorated, and in the Eastern Church that's still the case. When Patriarch Methodius died, Empress Theodora nominated a new patriarch by the name of Ignatius. Now, Ignatius figures in very prominently in what will lead up to this 8th ecumenical council, the final Eastern council, ecumenical council that is. Ignatius was the son of a former Byzantine emperor himself, Michael I, who had been murdered in 813. During that time, all of Michael's sons were castrated so that they would not be fit for the office of emperor. The policies or the practices of blindings and castrations and mutilations, which today when we hear about some of the practices or some of the things that went on in the Byzantine Empire can seem very strange and beyond understanding, all were done in reference to the understanding that the emperor had to be whole, had to have full functioning of all of his powers. So if you were blinded, if you had been castrated, anything of that nature, where you were deprived of a bodily integrity, you were therefore no longer fit to be the emperor, and therefore you were no threat to the reigning emperor. So Ignatius, who was the son of Michael I, the Emperor Michael I, was now the patriarch, and he himself was a great iconophile. And he was also a member of a backer of the Studium, which was a urban monastic movement, an urban monastery in Constantinople and elsewhere, but very prominent in Constantinople. And the founder of the Studium, Theodore the Studite, who had lived earlier in the century, lived and died earlier in the 9th century. He was also an outspoken advocate for the icons. His own time was around that of Empress Irene, so the end of the 700s, beginning of the 800s. And many of the monks of the studium wanted to make sure that those bishops who had collaborated with the repression and the destruction of religious icons would pay some penalty. And Ignatius was part of this group, which eventually led to some problems. One of the bishops that he went after was a bishop down in Sicily, in the See of Syracuse, and this particular bishop, by the name of Gregory, factors in the controversy leading up to in this current controversy. Theodora's son, Michael III, as he approached maturity, he was not of the strongest moral character. He quickly developed a problem with alcohol. He became a drunkard and earned the name Michael the Sot, Michael the Drunkard in terms of Byzantine history. He's sometimes known by that more than Michael III. And not having a strong character himself, a virtuous character by any means, and not a great thinker or administrator, he fell under the sway of his corrupt uncle by the name of Bardas. And Bardas, as his influence grew, he sought to sideline Theodora, Michael's mother, because he thought she wasn't good for the empire. She wasn't a good administrator, and above all, he wanted the power. So he convinced his nephew, Michael the Drunkard, to name him Caesar, so kind of second in charge of the empire, and then to remove his mother as regent, so kind of displacing Theodora, and now Bardas, who is an unsavory character and involved in a lot of questionable practices, becomes the second in command in the empire, really the one guiding Michael to make certain moves. Ignatius, Patriarch Ignatius, took offense, rightfully so, at some of the things that Bardas was doing. And the issue that brought everything to a head was that Bardas was living with his daughter-in-law, so type of incestuous relationship, and everyone knew it. It was a wide-open scandal, and he had showed no remorse for it. So on Epiphany of the year 858, he comes to Divine Liturgy for the celebration of the Eucharist in Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral there, and Patriarch Ignatius denies him Holy Communion, which sets off fireworks, denying Holy Communion to Catholics who are in a state of public scandal is not simply an issue for the 20th or 21st century. It has been something going back for many centuries. In the year 857, so just prior to this blow-up with Bardas in the cathedral, Ignatius had been pressured by both Michael, the drunkard, and Bardas to put Theodora and all of Theodora's daughters, or Michael's sisters, into convents, basically force them out of the imperial court, get them out of the way, get rid of all of their influence. Now, this was one of the things Bardas is doing. Before he even got to this, it was widely rumored that he had planned the assassination of Theodora's chief advisor a few years earlier. So a lot of underhanded and scandalous deeds at the hands of